If you pick up a hitchhiker on a dark highway and he starts coughing every time you hear a noise from your sleeper berth, do not ignore it. He isn't sick. He's just running cover. He is actively making noise to drown out the sound of his partner breaching your blind spot. Last April, I picked up a shivering guy on US 93. I didn't realize that while I was fighting to unlock my passenger door, his partner was using that exact distraction to climb my frame rails. And I didn't realize the heavy thud against my back wall wasn't just a guy riding on the outside of my truck. US 93 is a desolate, unforgiving stretch of two-lane blacktop between Wickenburg and Wickiup. Some drivers call parts of it Blood Alley. There is zero ambient light out there, no cell service, and no shoulder to safely pull onto. It's just the hypnotic, endless rhythm of the dashed white lines and the black ocean of the high desert on either side. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. Springtime in the Mojave means massive, violent thermal shifts. The asphalt bakes at 85 degrees during the afternoon, and the air plummets into the freezing low 40s by midnight. I saw a man walking the gravel shoulder in a thin, frayed denim jacket. He was shivering violently under the amber glow of my high beams, his head tucked down against the bitter crosswind. Against every survival instinct I had developed in 20 years of driving, I pulled the yellow air brake valve. The heavy rig hissed to a halt, kicking up a massive, blinding cloud of white alkali dust into the headlights. The passenger door on my old Peterbilt was notoriously sticky. You couldn't just reach over and pop the lock. I had to physically unbuckle my seatbelt, lean my entire upper body across the wide center console, and repeatedly shove my shoulder against the heavy interior door panel, while the guy outside fumbled with the frozen exterior handle. It took him a solid 20 seconds of yanking and pulling before the latch finally gave way with a heavy metallic clack. 20 seconds where my eyes and my entire situational awareness were locked completely on the right side of the cab. For 20 seconds, I had my back completely turned to the driver's side mirrors. He climbed in. The cab instantly smelled like wet sagebrush, dried sweat, and stale tobacco. He didn't have a bag. He didn't have a phone. He didn't even look at me. He just nodded a silent acknowledgement, buckled his heavy nylon seatbelt, and stared straight ahead through the bug-splattered windshield. I threw the transmission back into gear and got the 80,000-pound rig back up to highway speeds. 10 miles up the dark road, over the steady, vibrating roar of the diesel engine, I heard a sharp, rubbery squeal from the sleeper berth directly behind me. It was followed almost immediately by a dull, heavy thud. My eyes darted to the driver's side mirror, but the angle was perfectly blind. The 24-inch gap between the back of the sleeper cab and the flat aluminum nose of the 53-foot trailer is a visual dead zone. If someone is lying flat on the metal grating of the catwalk back there, you cannot see them. I kept my eyes locked on the white lines, letting the vibration of the road numb my hands. The hitchhiker hadn't shifted his weight once. He was sitting rigidly, staring at the upper corner of the windshield, using the dark tint of the glass to watch my eyes in the reflection. Every time the chassis flexed on a curve, or every time I heard a faint, metallic scrape from the sleeper wall, he'd let out a dry, violent, hacking cough. It wasn't a sick man's cough. It felt like rehearsed. For the next 40 miles, the cab felt like a pressure cooker. I realized the smell of wet sagebrush had slowly faded, replaced by something distinctly cold. It was the smell of raw night air, and diesel exhaust. My mind raced through every possibility, but the reality was simpler and much more dangerous. It took me a while to understand. When the orange sodium lights of the Kingman interchange finally bled into the cab, I felt the passenger seat shift. He unbuckled his heavy nylon harness before I even touched the service brakes. The second the rig downshifted for the first red light, he grabbed the handle, shoved the door wide, and dropped into the intersection. He didn't walk away. He jogged toward the shadows of an abandoned way station. A split second later, the truck's air ride suspension hissed, dipping sharply on the driver's side. I looked in my left mirror just in time to catch a flash of movement. A second, darker figure dropping down from my fuel tank, hitting the wet asphalt and sprinting across the intersection to join him. I didn't stay to ask questions. I slammed the passenger door and pushed the rig another quarter-mile to a brightly lit pilot station. I parked under a floodlight and grabbed my heavy mag light. I walked straight to the driver's side fuel tank. The exterior baggage door, the rectangular aluminum panel sitting 18 inches below where my pillow rests, was hanging wide open, vibrating against the frame. I hooked my fingers under the edge and flashed my light inside. My spare chains and emergency coolant jugs hadn't been thrown out. They were shoved violently against the back wall. The ribbed aluminum floor was covered in wet, white alkali dust. Right in the center were the smeared impressions of heavy work boots, shifting around in a tight space. I backed away, the bile rising in my throat. As I retreated, the flashlight hit the black rubber weather stripping on the bottom lip of the door frame. Sitting perfectly in a row were 4 small black Phillips head screws. They weren't rusted. They were clean. I knew exactly where they came from. They belonged to the thin plastic bulkhead divider, the flimsy interior access panel that separates the outside storage box from the hollow cavity directly underneath my sleeper mattress. I flashed the beam up toward the ceiling of the compartment. The plastic divider wasn't just unscrewed, it was pushed completely out of the way. The hitchhiker was never sick. His 20-second distraction was exactly enough time for his partner to step onto the fuel tank, slide into the exterior box, and pull the door shut behind him. For 40 miles, while I gripped the wheel and listened to that hacking cough, a second man had been lying inches beneath my spine, quietly taking apart the floor of my cab. I don't know why they bailed at the Kingman interchange. Maybe they just needed a ghost ride past the federal checkpoints. Maybe I was supposed to be the cargo, and the red light just threw off their timing. I didn't wait around to find out. I still drive US 93, and I still run the night shifts. But every time I see a shivering shadow standing on the shoulder in the freezing wind, I don't reach for the air brakes. I just grip the wheel and stare straight ahead, living with the memory of exactly what a 20-second mistake buys you on Blood Alley. So, before we clock out for the night, I want to see who else is out here in the dark. Write down where you're from and the exact time you finished listening to this story. Let's see how far the graveyard shift reaches across the globe tonight. If you've ever found a mark or a piece of equipment on your vehicle that you know for an absolute fact wasn't yours, I want to hear about it in the comments down below. Drop a like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications to join the graveyard shift. We have a lot more stories to cover, and as always, thanks for listening.